Good morning, everybody. My name is Joanne Butcher. I am a business coach and CEO of Filmmaker Success, which is an organization that works with filmmakers to help them navigate the incredibly mysterious, dark underworld, otherwise known as the film industry. And so we do these interviews called The Filmmaker's Life, and we interview filmmakers who have been through at least the process of making their first feature film to see how they have did it, how they did it, and how they have built their careers. And I think that one thing sometimes filmmakers think is that there's some kind of path that's a set path that they're supposed to follow. And I think we've pretty much clarified by now that that is not the case. Everybody has their own way of doing things and their own, pieces of luck and all of those things. So today I'm going to introduce you to Lee Ann Kurr, and she is a filmmaker. We're going to now find out all about her. I don't start with a bio because my first question that I always love to ask is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
Well, good morning, everyone. Morning here from the West Coast. I guess it's going on the afternoon in the East Coast. Yeah, I had more of a roundabout path. So I started in acting. I grew up in the theater. I was actually trained to be a classical actor. So I trained in London and worked with several Shakespeare companies, American Shakespeare Center, Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey. I was very rigorous about that path. Um, and I started playwriting in undergrad, and I was like, I can't playwright. But I really loved it, and I had a couple plays produced on a small scale. And as I started exploring writing more and more, I realized the things I was trying to articulate and do really required film. It was like I was writing for the wrong medium. The things I was trying to express were actually not best suited for the stage, they were best suited for the camera. And so I had a couple people suggest, have you tried writing a screenplay as opposed to a play? It seems like what you're trying to do is actually a screenplay, which was great advice. I started working as an actor off Broadway in New York and doing a couple of productions and auditioning for some dream roles. And it was all actually going quite well. And that's why I just sort of felt this moment where I was like, I don't know if this is actually what I want to commit my full creative energies toward. I really felt this draw to work with actors. And I had directed a couple of stage productions with young actors. I had started like a Shakespeare summer camp for youth. So I directed The Comedy of Errors and Midsummer Night's Dream and had worked with young people and Shakespeare for years. And I just found that like creating that production of Midsummer brought like so much joy and love. And but then I found also that what I wanted to express artistically was better suited for the screen rather than the stage, as I said. So it kind of was this
Before we
gradual process. Oh
before
yeah,
we
go
go
ahead.
on, I'm gonna have to. There's just a whole bunch of things here.
I
So
know it's like this
I
whole
did
journey.
not know that you were an actor and were grounded in that. That's really amazing. And I also didn't know that you were grounded in Shakespeare because that's unusual. And I
Yeah.
was given complete works of Shakespeare as a Christmas present when I was 11, and I started reading Shakespeare. I have no idea how that happened, but I am a Shakespeare fanatic,
Me
and
too, still.
it's just to me, when, for example, when screenwriters are talking about three-act structures, and I don't know, I just feel as though I have Shakespeare in my DNA in a certain way,
Mm,
um, and it's not sort of my thing anymore. I'm in film, and you
right.
know, occasionally we get to have an experience like, I don't know if you saw the tragedy of Macbeth, the
I
co-written.
mean, it was great. I was so excited. I loved it so much. It was so good.
Oh my God.
It was
I
so good.
I, I you know I, I I love Macbeth. I just love Macbeth. But the way that Denzel Washington played Macbeth was so extraordinary to me
Yeah.
because, and I think I wrote about this in one of my newsletters, but Macbeth is always, you know, he's this big lord and he's all full of himself, and then the witches come and,
Yeah.
start that in his ear, and he's such a big man, and Denzel Washington played him as such a small man.
It was,
My God.
I kept thinking of him in Training Day when I was watching the beginning, and I was just like, what a transformational actor
Hmm.
to be able to go to this alpha place by, and also this like crazed, just completely, just this transformation just in that film is so incredible. And then also just knowing that he's the actor from Training Day that's able to do this, and it felt so like contained, and I don't know if passive is the right word, but it felt just so like demure in comparison.
I was just so shocked, and I mean in a very good way, by the performance, because it was so, and what I read was that Denzel did not have that class training,
Hmm.
and so he was bringing to the, but to me what he brought to the role was so current, so contemporary.
Hmm.
The smallness that we have seen in our uh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay.
Big head honchos. Yeah.
Yeah, these, you know, the big men who are, they're just this tiny.
Yeah.
That was what he brought. It was this 21st century uh, vision of the horror of toxic masculinity, but in this, you know, coming from this place of weakness and power. Oh, just mind blowing, mind blowing.
It
Oh,
was great.
we could talk
I
Shakespeare
know.
all day.
It was.
Uh, that's great. And then, so when you had that experience of running Shakespeare camp and, you know, doing your Midsummer Night's
It was great.
Dream and so
Yeah.
on, did you realize that you were a director, or did you realize you were a producer, or what did you see when you had that experience about yourself?
Yeah, I really think that's when directing started coming forward, because I felt like I loved having a point of view on the text, and we were working with grades 6 through 12, so it wasn't like, we're putting them in modern day Iraq. It's Troilus and Cressida in modern day Iraq. Like, no, nothing, like they're kids. Um,
One day
um,
we'll do that. One day we'll do that. Yeah.
I think I saw Troilus and Cressida in the park in New York that was like a modern day Iraq, and I was like, whoa, this is heavy. Um, but I loved like taking comedy of errors and being like, okay, have like, what's the lens? What's the point of view? Like, what's the thing that I'm saying with this play? And it's a comedy, and just like and I think working with young actors with my first film, not as young, but they were 18, 19 years old. So it felt very comfortable to work with younger performers who were still, I know I'm kind of jumping a bit, but just I like working with performers who are still figuring out what works for them as actors. Um, and so yeah, working with these younger kids, it was honing comedic moments. It was shaping the scenes and the cadence and the rhythm of the scene, and finding, because with Shakespeare and comedy, I mean, I heard Jordan Peele say once that both horror and comedy are about rhythm, um, and finding the beat of what's happening, and both to find scares and laughs are about rhythm. And
Let
I
me
think
also,
that,
I'm sorry, I keep jumping in.
yeah, it's fine.
You said
I'm going
something.
all over the place. I'm talking about Jordan
No,
Peele
you
right
said,
now. It's
oh, well, let me go back there. So, when you said about you like directing actors who are still working out, you know, what works for them. That's right. That was the phrase you used. So, as a director, when you're working with somebody who hasn't figured out what works for them, how can you, as a director, help that actor?
Yeah, I think that really came into play on Student Body, on my first feature film, and certainly working with younger actors on stage. Um, which was, sometimes it just takes time at first to suss out. You kind of get a spidey sense do they need affirmation? Are they that performer? And I had a performer like that, or an actor in Student Body, where he really needed me to check in with him in between every take. And I could just sort of, like, you kind of sense it. You're like, he's looking at me. He's got those puppy dog eyes and he wants to know how he did. And if I don't check in, he's going to think I hate him. He's going to think he's doing bad. It's going to actually backfire. So it's like, I'm not coddling him. I'm giving him what he needs to keep moving forward. So I think it was kind of developing a sensitivity, like kind of like just being really, really tuned in to how, especially with takes, when the take ends, what's the actor's body language? What's the actor conveying without necessarily saying anything to me? There's some actors where they're like this, they're like back in it. They want to go. They're just like, they just want again, 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 again. And that's how Christian Camargo on Student Body was, where he comes from rigor. I mean, he performed at the Globe with Mark Rylance. Like, the guy's like so rigorous. He just wants to go. And so I'm like, set up again. Like, I want him to be in that space. So I'm not going to set him aside and be like, Christian, let's talk about your character's motive. Like, let's go. Like, he wants those takes. But then with the younger actors, it's like, some of them you can tell are they looking at you? Are they just sort of chatting and seeming like they're just like into it and let's just roll. I really think that liminal moment after you call cut, I love seeing, like looking at my actors, as opposed to, I know it's like, go straight to camera. How was that? Yeah, sure. But that little moment, I think, is precious in terms of discovering where they are once you call that cut, and seeing, okay, I think they need me, or okay, they do not need me right now. We just need to roll.
Right. And what do you do as a director with a performer who isn't getting what they want and what you want? How do you handle that?
Thinking of a couple moments, I mean, I really had a lovely ensemble for Student Body, so I was really happy with everyone overall. I think, for me at least, and coming from a performer's background, and this is just my take, but I think one of the worst things an actor could feel on set is that they're holding things up and it's their fault. And once I think a performer feels that way, an actor has that on their shoulders, it's like poison gas. It's not going to make the performance improve. They're just going to be more self-conscious and it's going to get worse. So for me, I never, even though we had 18 days to shoot, I never wanted an actor, if it wasn't working, to feel like we're running out of time. Even if we were, which we were, I wanted them to feel like we have tons of time. So let's like play. So I think there was one scene in particular with an actor where I think she was playing it really on the nose, of just like, I'm determined and I want this to happen and blah, blah, blah. And I really wanted it to be her to like play with her food, her to have fun with having power over this person. So it helped. We really had to do it several times and we did not have a lot of time. And my AD is like, and I'm like, I don't, like, if this scene doesn't land, then why are we here? So I think just really not letting the actor feel like there's any rush, and giving that note of like, oh, I think I remember giving the note of, why don't you say these lines as if you're telling this person how to bake a cake, how like, oh, you add the flour, it's your favorite cake, and then you'll do this and you'll do what I want because that's what I want, you know, I want that from you, and you'll add the sprinkle. Like, just how can we think about this scene and shift the paradigm in a new way, and then also make them feel like we really have time and it's fine. And the AD can go freak out in a corner. I don't care, because we'll make it up. Like, I don't care. Like, if the scene doesn't happen, everything we're doing it doesn't matter. So
Right. Yeah, that's great. there's a lot of psychology in that. Um, I got to work with Doris Wishman on one of her last two films. She's a cult filmmaker, if that's the right word. She used to make sexploitation movies in the 60s, and she sort of emerged in the 90s, I think, and made two films, and she was actually in her 80s. We didn't know that. She lied to us about her age, but I got the credit of script supervisor
Mm.
on the film, but I told her that I wanted the title of set therapist. Because
Yeah.
I had to spend an awful lot of time with Lead, who was such a diva. She was unbearable, but she was always like, "Is my hair okay? Do I look all right? Is my, it was just constant, And Doris had other things to do, so it ended up
Yeah.
being my job, to basically,
Yeah.
talk her off the ledge every single day,
Yeah.
10 times a day. It's just like, oh, wow.
Yeah, definitely had moments where there were things in the script that a certain actor knew coming into the job that they were going to have to do. Nothing crazy, not like get naked and jump in an icy pool, just like things like you're going to have to act like you can do a pull. Like there's certain, and there was so much resistance on the day. And it's like, what do you do when it's like, you've had the script, you know that this was part of the character. So, yeah, how that line between like coddling
Uh-huh.
but then also too much tough love because then sometimes actors are like, well, screw you, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so hard to know like that
Yes.
it's like this dance of like, maybe I'll try the coddle end a little more, see where that buys me, and then maybe a little more tough love and see what it's like, this constant dance. And then once you kind of figure them out, you're like, oh, okay, all I have to do is make them feel like they're kind of, crapping the bed a bit, and then they'll be like, oh crap, I can't mess up this job, and then they'll do it. It's like finding that niche.
Yes. Yes. So here you are with Midsummer, some Shakespeare in the Shakespeare camp. Yes. And so it started to dawn
Watch
on you.
Shakespeare.
You're like,
Yeah.
hmm, I think it's going to be filmed. So what did you do next? Path did you choose at that point?
So that was a couple months before. I was in a show in a small theater in the Lower East Side, and it was a really, I think also just coming from that end where actors can sometimes be mistreated, and it was a really negative, a male director that um, really had some horrible practices towards his actors. And I think that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, I think this is not for me as a career. I'm willing to put up with a lot for filmmaking. I think it's like, what's the thing? I think it's like the crucial question. What's the thing where no matter what, you're going to put up with jerks, where like you'll do it. And I think I was like, okay, acting's not it. And that was kind of the pivotal moment where I started developing an idea on a screenplay, and I was just like, okay, I think I have a unique perspective after many years of acting, and then I think I want to start developing this muscle of thinking of things in terms of directing film. Um, Started developing, so screenwriting
I
came
just wanted to
first.
say, what a
Mhm.
sad moment. I have a very dear friend who came to that moment. Actually, she was uh, sexually harassed
Uh,
by the director, but and that was the end of it for her. But what a sad thing to come to that moment, and in a way have to make that decision. I mean, great for you because you had something else, another direction to
yeah,
go. For her, it was the end. That was her dream, and
yeah,
she just could not handle that. And it all came when the Me Too thing happened again. It all came up again. It's like
yeah.
20 years ago, but we had a lot of conversations about it. But such a common experience. So I'm really sad that happened.
Yeah, it was verbal abuse. It was also physicalized in the sense that things would get thrown across the room, not at you, but just like, and then, yeah, it created this extremely unsafe environment. And then I spoke up and was gaslit and basically told to shut up. And again, it wasn't like I had this mystical view of, oh, once I become a writer director, that I'll never be treated poorly by anyone again. Did not have that perception. I just thought, what's the thing where I'm willing to do it and I can stand my ground and put up with it? And I was like, it's not acting. I want to work with actors, and I want to make sure that their experience on my set is never this, and that they're respected.
Right. Yeah. That word you just used about unsafe. I think a lot of particularly filmmakers don't realize the levels of safety and unsafety, that there can be, and it's so essential. And there are times that is not the case on sets. Actually, we've had a big famous thing that happened recently where somebody got killed. But safety, I mean, if you can't be physically safe, it's just, what are we doing? But
yeah. And so from there, I didn't have the funds to go to grad school, and I didn't particularly relish getting into debt. Although I'm not saying by any means don't go to grad school if that's not something you feel passionate. If you feel passionate about going, I'm not going to debt, do it. It wasn't for me. So I actually, instead of,
don't go into debt.
I don't want to make anyone feel bad.
I say do it, but don't go into debt.
Yeah. I would have been in the hole a lot of thousands of dollars. So I just did not have the resources for grad school. So instead I started script supervising, actually. I was in New York, and I did 3 years. So I kind of think of it as, instead of grad school, I worked on set for 3 years. And that was a combination of, it was all non-union. It was like getting close where it's like, I could go union. And then I was like, no, that's not why I'm not doing this to be a script supervisor professionally. So I did some narrative feature films. A Hallmark Christmas movie was in there. That was crazy.
Really? Why was that crazy?
Oh my gosh, they make them so fast. Whoa. It's 3 6-day weeks. It's just, you're in a Connecticut in August and you're pretending it's December. Everyone's putting on these heavy coats and it's like 95 degrees outside. It's like this sausage thing where it's like, go, 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 we've got to shoot. It was really stressful, but yeah, did commercials and just non-union, and made some money, not a ton of money, but it was enough to supplement my partner's income. And so, yeah, again, not 6 figures, but I wasn't losing money. I was actually earning, and I didn't go to film school. So it put me right in just the eye of the hurricane, where I got to see how directors worked. I got to see things that I thought were great practices, and then things that I was like, that's not my style. I wouldn't do it that way. I got to just observe and learn about, this is a gaffer and this is an electrician. This is what a second AC does. This is what a first does. And just like really it's kind of like being on a ship, right? You're like a pirate, and like, you're like one of like the little skippers, and you're like watching the captain and the first mate, and you're kind of like, oh, this is how a ship works. I'll get my own pirate ship someday. So it felt like getting my sea legs on set, so that when I walked onto set as a director, it felt very comfortable. I wasn't like, who is this gaffer you speak of? Like, I knew I could speak the language and wasn't like, I don't know, completely out of sorts. So yeah, I did 3 years of that as I was developing and screenwriting and learning to write, and just kind of trying to get a project together eventually to make.
So did you make your own short films? Did you start with that, or did you go straight to making a feature? You made shorts.
I made a short, which was entirely funded by me. I pretty much, I think I made good financial decision to not go to grad school, but I did empty out my savings account to make my short. So it's kind of a mixed bag financial advice from me. But
no, I my short film clients all raise the money before they make the film, because I'm like, and often filmmakers don't understand that they're not going to make any money off a short.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already difficult with a feature, but with a short, so
Yeah.
we raise the money first
Yeah.
and then make the film. And both of those projects are such growing experiences for filmmakers. But so many spend the money out of their savings, and I'm like,
Yeah. I didn't have you back then, so there's no one being like, Lee Ann, maybe don't. So I used a couple grand of my own money. And it was a great learning experience. It wasn't, it's not like, I don't know. I've been speaking a lot with friends about the wonderkind narrative. And I think so this idea that like you'll come in and you'll make this film and it's gonna like shred at Sundance and you're gonna be like Ari Aster, like you're just gonna like just kill it. Like, and I think it's a really harmful narrative. I think the idea of like your first film has to be like the best film. I think it's actually just thinking about like Hitchcock and how many dozens of films he made before Rebecca and made before, later masterpieces, dozens and dozens of films. And I think having that iterative process of I made a short and then I directed a web series, a couple episodes of a web series, and then I directed my friend's music video, and I also helped produce. I produced all of these things too. And that was all before Student Body, my first feature. And yeah, I think like just if you can kind of iterate in that way and learn.
It's so true, and now I understand what you mean. And the funny thing is that believing in that wonderkin mythology is a real way to stop yourself working.
Yeah.
When back years ago, the way I did that to myself was I said, I'm not Shakespeare.
Right.
What's the point? So it's a way to make sure that you don't do anything at all. And then the other side of it is, and I told you this story where I regularly hear this kind of thing where, oh, I've made my first short, now I need $25 million to make my first feature.
Yeah.
And that's not going to get people anywhere either.
Right.
And so, I always bring up Barry Jenkins, who really is in my version of a wonderkin, I call him a genius, but
yeah.
He made 2 shorts, then he made a feature for $13,000 in Sundance.
Was that Medicine for Melancholy? Was that 13,000?
Yeah, $13,000.
I didn't know it was for that little. Good for him.
Yeah. And then 8 years went by because he got caught in that trap of, oh, I'm going to Hollywood and something's happening, and nothing happened. And he quit. And 8 years went by before he ended up making Moonlight for 1.5 million. But people are like, oh, I want to make Moonlight,
Yeah, just like make Moonlight.
Right. Yes. There were some steps first.
For a couple. I was like, oh, like it's like he came out of nowhere. It's like no. He didn't come out of nowhere. It was the same thing with Chloe Zhao. I was just reading this Filmmakers article about after Songs for My Brother, no one was knocking on her door, and she got lost in that 2 million loop, which I know I'm for my second feature, I'm like, maybe we'll do it, but I don't want to get stuck in that loop because she was like, it broke her heart. Like she couldn't get it, lost it, tried to, I think, just went crazy trying to like do this big step up. And then The Rider, which for me is, I think, my favorite film of hers. I think it's just incredible. She did it on, I mean, probably 5 figures. I haven't seen a number posted, but just the scope of what she's talking about, I would say it sounds like 5 figures as well.
Right.
And then I mean, I would say she's also a genius, like Barry Jenkins.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I haven't actually watched any interviews with her, but that's a great story because I'm always looking for under $100,000 movie examples. So that's a great one. I'm going to look that up. Who's that?
Sorry, there's a very large spider. There we go. Oh my gosh. Okay, there was a very large spider in my room.
That was very large.
That was crazy. It was like, hello.
Woo!
Got it.
Who is that on the screen? So yeah, that I think that people, but the problem is with it. The problem with thinking I can make a $25 million movie is just that that is just never going to happen. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. That is never going to happen unless your uncle can give you $25 million. Although I would tell the uncle not to, but but
Yeah.
once you have these fantasies, I call them, in your mind, it can be really destructive and not helpful at all in actually moving forward, moving your career forward, actually making something happen, and then going to the next step. So you
Yeah.
did. Were you working on these projects while you were script supervising, or
Yes.
okay? So you would take time out from script supervising.
Yes. I mean, I got pretty consistent work as a script soup, but it wasn't so constant that because I was also new to script supervising. I was able to do both, and I was also nannying to supplement income. So it was several things at once.
Mixture, yeah, a mixture, and that sounds perfectly reasonable. So how did you? What was the web series, by the way, that you directed?
It's called Wonder, a web series, and it was kind of in the same world as not there was no music, but like Dr. Horrible's sing along blog, where it was like a bit of like lo-fi sci-fi. At the time, obviously perspectives have changed on him, but like a Joss Whedon-y kind of
Uh-huh.
fun, like,
Uh-huh.
and it was a lot of learning. I don't know if anyone here has worked with friends on projects, and
Oh, do
sometimes
tell.
sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it can be a little rough. So it was a group of college friends of mine, and we wanted to make something together, and it was hard when you choose friends to collaborate with, and you're kind of now in a different mode with them, and there's money involved and there's fundraising. It was it led to some ended friendships. It really
Oh,
was a
shame.
rough it was a
Wow.
rough go. It really so I think
Do you
it's tricky.
do you think that if you had like if you had sort of all said, okay, we're friends, but we're going to make sure that we have all our paperwork in place, do you think that would have solved things?
Yeah, I think there was, I guess, the word maturity, or just a naivete about the separation of like the friendship from the business and the money. And I
Mhm.
think going forward from there, it's like it's not a red flag if someone is like, oh, let's draw up paperwork, let's draw up contract. It's a red
That's
flag if they don't.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
And I
Yeah.
think like when you're younger and you're like, we're friends, it's like, oh, I don't need agreements with you because we're buddies. It's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 that's actually the opposite.
The
That's, you want to
opposite.
preserve the relationship, and it's like you're sequestering things through paperwork.
Right. It's more important when it's friends. I
Yeah.
hear that all the time. People will say, "Oh, well, I have a friend." I'm like, "No, when it's your friend, that you have to be twice as professional
Yes.
because it's so easy to just say, ah, it'll be fine,
Yes.
and it won't be.
It 9.9 times out of 10, it probably won't be.
It won't be.
So
And it's so funny when money, when people start to think that there's going to be money, it's like, oh my gosh, they go crazy, and there may not be any money. They just think that there's money.
it's true.
Did anything happen with the web series? What did you do with it?
We screened at a couple small festivals in New York, so we were able to go and have it be seen. Um, but no, I mean, I think that there were expectations also that were naive, and we all came from theater. So I think we were all like, oh, this will be this and that'll be that. And I also just think we were completely off base about what a web series is and
Yeah.
what it does and what it's for.
Yes.
So I think that's also, if you're going to work in that medium, to be very aware of like precedent, like what are web series, like, yeah, everyone's like, oh, high maintenance, then it got picked up by HBO. That's not going to be probably your story. So like, why are you making this, and what is the purpose?
Yes, I feel as though that is the most common error I see filmmakers making right now is, oh, I'm going to make a series. And I feel like a stock record just saying over and over again, well, is that really the
Yeah.
problem is we can't sell it. That to
Yep.
me, that's the problem. We can't sell it, and I want to see filmmakers rewarded financially as well as all the other ways for their work. You know.
It's TV is so expensive, and there's a reason why there's no independent TV.
Mm, mm. That's true.
So
No
yeah,
independent TV.
it's so, so expensive.
Mm.
So I just, and especially if you're shooting, we did 4 shorts, we did 4 episodes, they're all 20 minutes long. That's an incredible amount
Yeah.
of material. So, and it
Yeah.
wasn't, I mean, like a proof of concept for a feature film, like what, Chazelle did for Whiplash or something. Like it's not moving towards,
Right.
and it's not going to be bought. Like who's going to, like
Nobody.
HBO is going to, no one's going to buy this.
And
So
80 minutes, you've got a feature.
yeah.
80
And there's no,
minutes.
again, and because it's serialized, there's no feature version. Yeah. So it's things
80
now. I didn't know
80
then.
minutes of work is a feature. It's like, oh, you know.
Yeah. Things 22-year-old Lee Ann did not know.
So when did you start working on Student Body?
It was January of 2015, 2016. Sorry. I know because I started working on it at the same time I met my husband. So Student Body had been as old as my relationship to my now husband. Yeah, and it was, the idea changed a lot. It was at first I wrote like a handwritten draft where it was about college kids coming back for their high school reunion, and then the girl that they had, bullied was coming back to get them. So it had like a different vibe. And then I basically just, I was still pretty new to screenwriting, and I think coming out of it, it's all been such a learning experience because you come out of it knowing things that you couldn't have known going into it. So I think it really came down to, I want to make a film for my 14, 15-year-old self who loved to go to slumber parties and who loved to hang out with friends and watch Clue or Heathers or just these sort of like, or spooky adjacent movies. So I really just sort of was like, okay, I think I would like to make that slumber party movie that I wish I could have watched as a 15-year-old, and have it be a YA teens fun romp with also some thrills and chills, but be about difficult female relationships and difficult, friendships. And I had a lot of trouble socially in high school and middle school, and also was bullied, and also came from like
Was that because you were a Shakespeare kid?
I don't think it was because I don't know. I think it was just a typical mean girl, popular girl situation.
Wow.
And I had a lot of social anxiety. So it was really coming from making a story about like, how do you assert yourself? How do you find your way through domineering personalities like teachers who put so much pressure on you sometimes, and it can be sometimes not a great mentorship, and then also your peers who want to form you in a certain way and want you to do what they want you to do. So how do you kind of find your own identity and footing amongst all of that? So it was kind of a nexus of different ideas that came together and started developing the idea. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. It was rooted in your personal experience, and so do you think that when the young people who watch the film see it, that they'll see themselves and they'll see how to deal with those kinds of situations?
I hope so. I mean, no spoilers to anyone who hasn't seen it.
Tell us the log line. Tell us what the film
Oh
is.
gosh, the what I'm trying to It's been so long since I've like pitched the
Not
log
the
line.
log line, I mean, but just,
Yeah,
tell us the story a little bit about the
so
film.
this student body is about a young teenager named Jane Shipley who basically gets caught up between her best friend and her teacher, who are both manipulating her in different ways. Her teacher wants her to become a perfect student and to get away from her group of friends who are kind of messing around and joking and silly and don't really care about school. And then her best friend wants her to leverage a retake of this test so they can all get a better grade and they can get what they want. And she's trying to manipulate her as well. So it all comes to a head when on a Friday night, they break into the school and play a prank and to kind of mess around in school. And they find that someone is following them and kind of locking them down into the school. So they have to find a way to survive the night. And Jane wants to figure out who is behind this. So yeah, it's definitely, I'd say, a more character-driven slasher where I really wanted us to get to know these teens and these relationships and feel invested behind them as people. And also be sensitive to the fact that kids do die in schools now. And so I didn't want to be flippant or throwaway about having, spoilers, it's a slasher, so I won't give away who, but people are gonna die in the film. I wanted to be very deliberate about how I showed violence in a school, and be very selective about what that was. And it was interesting because when the film came out, there were people who, I had like a moment where I saw reviews and thoughts and I was like, never again. I like turned it all off. I was like, don't look. Because I think there are people who, it's a slasher film, so you have people who want Saw. And I get that, there are people who are like, oh, 1 stars out of 10, it's not violent enough, it's not gory. And it's just, and I get that, if that's what they're looking for. Student Body isn't a gore fest. And that's okay if I get that criticism, because I really did want to be respectful of the fear that, schools where people die, their kids are killed. It's not a hypothetical thing, it's a real thing. And so I wanted to be withholding and selective about violence and the depiction of violence.
Gosh, last weekend I was at a party and somebody was talking about every time his kids go to school, he's afraid, and I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's how it is today for parents in America.
Yeah.
I don't know if Americans understand this is not the way it is in other countries, but that's the way it is here. And wow, what a thing to think that every day you're afraid that your children, something might happen to them at school. I would never have thought to use the word slasher in terms of your film. You've used it several times. How do you define a slasher film?
It's so funny, Jen, because I feel like, and I'm so curious, I don't know if you've watched it yet. I totally understand if you hadn't had a chance, but for me, it was always more about psychological thrills and more about just the mind games and the pressure and the real fear of not having friends and the real fear of like not being good enough. Yes. And I think those were two things that were like fears 1 and 2 of Lee Ann growing up: not having any friends and not being good enough. Like boom, boom, done.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that I'm using those words now talking about it, because it really was like once marketing and companies came in, it's like, oh, it's a slasher, it's a horror. It's like, this is what your film is. Yes. Yes. And it's interesting to see how it becomes this, if you watch the trailer, it's this slasher movie. It's like boom, 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 like, there's this mascot with a hammer, blah, blah, blah. And I think different from the intended spirit, and whether or not that might be the best economic choice. They're trying to get butts in seats, as you say, Joanne. So they're coming at it from a different angle. But I always thought of it as a psychological thriller, and I was always very loath to use the word horror. And once it came out, it was like hashtag horror film, hashtag horror movie, hashtag horror, and I was like, okay, cool.
Uh-huh. I would have no problem calling it a horror film.
Mm,
Um, but it's definitely about a group of kids who get themselves into some serious trouble, you know. And but I would, I mean, I don't know if you use this word, but I think spooky is a funny word. I think, you know, when you're talking about the films you watched as a kid, you know, spooky,
yes.
scary. Those are the kind of words I would use. Slasher sounds very adult and
Yeah,
very,
I
and
agree.
your film is not that at all. But I think, you know, what you're experiencing is that I always say filmmakers are very complex. The industry is not.
Mm,
The industry is very simple and very straightforward. So this is the bucket.
yeah,
Like this is the bucket.
it's
And that's
true.
it. You know, and they can't really be very nuanced. Whereas, you know, filmmakers are like, oh, I'm making a sci-fi action comedy thriller horror film. You know?
Totally. I get it. And one of the best terms I heard was gateway genre. And I think that that was great for young people or people who, you know, we had a lot of viewers who were like, I would never watch a horror movie. I would never watch that, but I enjoyed your film. Like I had a great time.
Yes.
And it's like, it was very interesting where you have people coming in and being like, they want the Conjuring, like they want like James Wan level scares. So
Yes.
yeah, that's not going to be fulfilling for them.
Right. Right.
So it's like, and I remember I had so also the full picture of filmmaking. I had quite a before I immediately was like, never again. I'm not looking, and I haven't looked at a review since. There was quite a negative review. Um, and my producer was looking through it, and I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, negative review. Um, and end here, I'll read at the end of this like very just like everything is bad
Everything's bad.
review. This is what the review said. Student body fails to cut through expectations of well-versed slasher fans, but for teens just breaking into the subgenre and seeking something a little more adult, lively characters paired with timely messaging about the ridiculous amount of pressure that Gen Z faces these days should make this, at the very least, an entertaining watch at the next sleepover. And I was like, that's literally why I made the movie. That's why I made the movie. And it was like this like paragraphs of like, this
Yeah.
movie isn't scary. This movie is not violent. La 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 la. And then at the end, they wrote this gem. And I was like, that's literally my whole,
That was the film.
that's why I made it. Like, and it was just so funny how critics will be like, this isn't Saw, 0 stars. And it's like,
Oh
no,
my God.
it's not Saw. So let's look at it at what it is. So it just made me laugh because it was like, I was like, oh, I'll tattoo this on my forehead. Like this is a
Yes.
great quote. Like I'll put that on
Yes.
my mood board. Like that's a great quote. It
Yes.
means I did my job. So I think also like as your films come out, just sometimes you might get things where you're like, oh my God, it's horrible. They hate it. But then what are they judging it on? What are they looking at? What is the expectation? If it's not what your intention is, you know, it's just interesting how at the end this like golden nugget was like,
Oh my
but
God.
for
God.
teens, I was like, yeah, that's my audience. It's YA. Like, yeah.
I know I want to open it up for some questions, but I just want to have you just tell us something about your upcoming project.
Yeah. So I'm starting the process of getting financial resources together for Breaker's End, which is an elevated horror film. Um, and it is also featuring LGBTQ characters in 3 main roles. And the film is about a young woman who visits an elegant inn by the sea, and she reconnects with her manipulative best friend from college, which resurrects the haunting memories of their traumatic shared past and threatens to possess her entire future. So it's elevated feminist horror with a supernatural ghost story in there. Yeah.
And things do not go well.
They don't go well.
Oh, that's awesome. So, and this, are you going to make that this year? You're looking to make that this year, or?
We're looking to shoot in either January or February of 2023.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Thank you so much, Lee Ann. This was fun. Does anyone have any questions? And I can name names. I wish Ryan could come on and ask a question. Go ahead, Kay.
Hi there, Leanne. I'm just so happy to hear you talk in the way that you do about, I mean, the passion for your projects and the energy. I could just imagine if I was an actor, I'd want you to be a director. Like, just it just sounds great. You seem like a really wonderful person to kind of work with. So thank you for kind of sharing all that. I was trying to think of a question and I was coming up a little short, but I at least wanted to kind of put that out there and thank you for that. I guess one of the things, I've kind of always kind of wonder with the producing work and directing, do you see those things coming in conflict often, or is that something that you just automatically are good wearing both hats, or good with the idea of wearing both hats? Or do you sometimes think about like what it would be like kind of split that up a little bit?
That's a great question, Kay, and thanks for the kind words. Do you mean within the same project, or like pursuing different projects, like one as a producer, one as a director?
I was thinking within the same project.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think like as a writer, director, producer, and student body, it did feel like it's like you kind of have to like take off that writer hat and be like, okay, this is no longer a screenplay, this is being shot, director hat. And I think there were moments where it's like, as a producer, I understand we have to move on. Like, we have a schedule and I can't, but as a director, it's like, okay, I'm not the only, like, there are other producers that can think in the moment, that can think about those contingencies. I can't think left-brained. I can't think contingencies right in this moment. My job, I'm the only director. So I have to make sure that I'm speaking up for that voice that no one else has. So it did feel like, because, you're in produce for so long. I mean, of course, prep happens and you think as a director in prep, but that's like 4 weeks versus like 9 months or years of thinking as a producer. So I think it's a very conscious choice where you have to remember that as director, you're there for I believe you're the only one there on set that's there for the actors. In that moment, everyone else is doing something else. You're there for them. Obviously, you're in conversation. You have to be there for them because the cinematographer isn't, the sound off isn't, the costume designer is there to make them look good, but they're not there for performance. You're the only person that's there for performance. So I need to make sure that and thinking there is a producer tangent to that. If we're going to deliver an excellent film, then the performance has to be there. So the best thing I can do on set on the day is make sure that I'm fully embodying the director's voice. And then when I'm off, that producer voice can come back if necessary. But I think, like, yes, there of course is that conflict of like, that little voice is like, as a producer, we should probably move on. But I can't, someone else has to be that. I need to fully embody the director's voice because no one else is.
Great answer. I loved hearing that, and I definitely appreciate, and it's great to hear somebody articulate it, that well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Gaia has a question. I'm going to read it. She can't go on camera. I wrote my first screenplay, which won the opportunity to be produced for a local film festival. That's cool. I would like to have an all-women crew, but I'm having trouble finding people. Any suggestions of how to reach out effectively?
Oh, that's great. I think I script supervised on a short that was all female. So definitely have been in that environment before. I guess I would just be curious, like, what city you're in. Are you crewing up out of New York or LA? Because you're going to have just so much of a bigger pool of people. I'm not familiar with Austin. I know some people are in Austin and Atlanta, but I would say New York and LA, Sacramento. Okay, I mean, I don't know if you have the resources to bring people up from LA. I would just say, like, you're just going to have such a bigger pool of possible crew members that are quality and that are also making sure that you're reaching the diversity things you want to hit out of LA in that case. So I don't know what that is in terms of your resources to bring people up. I would say like the best way is, if you don't know people personally, is recommendations. I would say like if there's anyone else you know that has worked with, you know, women on set and has, you know, people in mind, I would just say take advantage of your network to recommend the folks that they would want you, like, would bring on set again. Sacramento, I mean, you know, that's the thing, is like, that's why so many projects start in New York or LA, is just because the pool of people is so much larger. And I just speak of this because we shot our film in Atlanta, and even in Atlanta, which has a massive, you know, Tyler Perry Studios and Marvel, it was a struggle at times to get the kind of people at the rate we wanted, which is not a struggle in New York or LA. So I would recommend reaching out to folks and also seeing, can you bring people up from the LA pool, because you'll just have a bigger net there, for sure. So that's helpful.
My answer, Gaia, and lovely to meet you. I have clients in Sacramento, but and Kay could give a great answer for this question. But basically, I think that I can sort of see it in your language. It says, you know, I would like to have. That's a very different language than I'm having a female crew. And so what I think is maybe the word would be something like leadership. But so it's, I'm having a female crew, and that's that. And so where's my crew? Where's my first AC? If you know, we talk about first AC, gaffer, like they have to be female, and you know, you need to find them. So I would just say, having the clarity that this is what I'm doing, and go from there. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Lee Ann. Thanks so much for being with us today. I've really appreciated your insights and your attitude, and looking at your filmography. You should be about 30 years older. And two things that I really appreciate about what you're saying is your theatrical approach to working with actors. Just helping them find what they need, and it's very refreshing. I had a theater background too, and a lot of times directors don't have that. So my question is this: as a female producer director, I've directed myself two feature films. And sometimes there are power struggles that happen on the set. And I'm wondering if, as a woman, you have experienced any particular power struggles like that, where you, it's a male-dominated industry, and working with crew members, sometimes guys have trouble taking orders from women. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mark, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Since I've actually made less features than you, I have that one experience as a director on set, but I will say, as a script supervisor, which is a department key, it is a very important role on set, and so often it is I think, a pejorative term, which is script girl or scripty. It's so often a diminutive, because that role is so often inhabited by women, and it's looked as a secretarial role as opposed to a key filmmaking role. So I would say, speaking as a producer and also as a director, I find that coming from years as a script supervisor and being treated as lesser than by a first AC, lesser than by a gaffer, when we're actually on the same playing field. On the same playing field, I should be getting paid the same as a first AC. I should be getting paid the same as a gaffer. And having that genderization of the role be so distinct, where there were so many shoots where every key was male except for me. And if I brought up an issue about how we shot a pivotal scene, saying, hey, I think, you know, so it's continuity. I think the role of the script supervisor is the liaison for the editor on set. If the editor can't be on set, it's, will this film cut? And that means continuity, and it also means coverage. It means, are we getting every piece we need so that we're not in trouble when you go to the editing room? So there were times where I'm coming at it saying, hey, just so we're, and my job, you know, was always raise awareness. I would never say, we need to do this, never dictatorial. And it's amazing how, even though I'm not using prescriptive or dictatorial language, as soon as I raise an issue in a room of men, it's seen as, oh, she's trying to like do the film. It's just, it was just amazing. So I think that as a producer, director, it's, and especially for men, it's so important, like, what are the ways in which there are even subtle diminutions of roles typically inhabited by women? Are we calling our script supervisor scripty or script girl? Are we calling our costume designer wardrobe or the pretty committee? What kind of language are we using to things that are typically feminized on set in ways that seditiously and subtly undermine their professionalism? And I think, again, I was lucky in that in my crew for my feature film, we had female producers. We had, I would say, gender equity. There were definitely key roles inhabited by men, but also key roles inhabited by women. And I felt very sensitive, and my producers as well, who are women, felt very sensitive about egalitarianism. So I would just really encourage, especially male producers and directors, what is the environment you're cultivating on set? And they're things that really, really can make a woman feel small on the day, that can go under the radar so easily. Just as simple as, where's the script girl? So I just, coming from that perspective as a script supervisor, really encourage looking at that, the nomenclature, and also like, are you paying in an equitable way? Are you treating your script supervisor as if she, or even he, is a department head? Because that role is.
You know, on the first feature film I directed, all of my producers were women. And I found that, as opposed to working with a bunch of guys who are trying to compete with each other and assert authority or alpha maleism, that the women were all about creating community and working together. And people weren't pulling rank. And it was really refreshing. And it was like, what can we do to make this community, this situation, this sequence better?
Yeah.
So
that's
thank
great.
you. Congratulations on
Thank you.
being a woman director.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And anytime, just say, I gotta go. But Stephanie has a question, then Ryan,
Sure.
who can't be on camera, has a question. So
Sure, let's do them.
go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Lee Ann, for being with us today. My question is, you mentioned you were a script supervisor for 3 years. I'm taking a I've taken a script supervisor class, and I'm wondering if I should build my network as a script supervisor here in Atlanta.
Great.
And then focus on my film career, or if I should jump in, try to do the feature, and try to get some legwork done.
That's a great question. For me, it always came down to the issue of financial resources, which was at the time when I started script supervisor, and also an issue of knowledge about filmmaking. So when I started script supervising, I didn't have access to resources or funds or a community because I was so new to film. So I'm thinking, just for you, like framing it, like, what's the purpose of, like, what will script supervising give you and bring you that you don't have? And if those are key things that you'll need, then I recommend, you know, for me, it was lack of knowledge about film sets, lack of a community within film. I only had community in theater, and then lack of financial resources. So I had to do a couple years of that. And at the same time, I was screenwriting, because it is almost $0 to screenwrite. So I think for me, that's what worked. And I guess for you, it's, do you have the resources you need to jump in and make this film? Do you feel like, and this isn't a rhetorical question, you know, like, something to consider, you might already have what you need to do that now. But I did find script supervising provided me with almost like an apprenticeship, a filmmaking apprenticeship that I knew I needed before I could step on with authority and confidence on set.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hopefully that was applicable to you.
Yes, it was. I really, I feel like I have the resources where I do know people here in the film industry here. But I don't necessarily have the financial network that I may need to get the feature done. So that's kind of what's giving me pause. It's kind of where I'm a little nervous about.
And I don't know if you're a writer, but what also helped was those years, that same year, I was honing my craft as a screenwriter. Mm-hmm. So by that time, I had been writing, and I wasn't, you know, I wasn't just out the gate, wrote my first screenplay and was like, all right, let's do this. I had been writing and working on that craft.
Yes, I'm a writer as well, so working on that as well.
Yeah, it's honestly, it married the two well, was writing and script supervising. Yeah, it worked well.
As Lee Ann had said earlier, she didn't know me earlier, but you know, for me, the craft of filmmaking needs to be matched with the craft of fundraising, and those two things are, from my perspective, equally important. And so it's like, I want to see my clients move their filmmaking knowledge forward and the ability to raise funds forward, because one without the other, it ends up being sort of lopsided. So if you could keep building your film career but never have access to more money as you build that, right, then it's out of balance. Whereas if you know, I call it build your fundraising muscle. So my beginners start raising $11,000-$12,000 to make a short, and you know, 40, 50 to 100 to make their first feature, and then, you know, more to make the second. But you know, you can't, this is why we were saying at the very beginning of the call, you know, you can't go from 0 to $2 million. It just doesn't happen. It's got to be, there are steps along the way, and part of that is fundraising. Part of it is filmmaking. Right? Yeah. Great to see you on camera, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to see if we can get this last question in from Ryan. Coming from a theater background, are there go-to exercises you do during rehearsals or on set that build trust with you as a director? Or how is it you as a director build trust and make a safe space for actors?
That's such a great question. And it's something I think I've...
Question.
Yeah.
Ryan's about to make her first feature as well. So.
Yeah, right. I remember Ryan. So I have a different approach with preparing for shooting with actors as opposed to, you know, rehearsal process with theater. I do think that actors come in, I don't, how do I say this? I don't want to be the pin that bursts anyone's balloon. I know that actors sometimes come in and I want to, it's almost like Tai Chi. Like, I want to work with the energy they give me. And I try not to superimpose a specific process, because I do feel sensitive that all actors work differently. And when you have a long rehearsal process with theater, you can massage that and work on scenes. But when it, with film, it's so truncated. So it is, I would say, Ryan, the latter of building a safe space so that we can play on the day and on set, as opposed to a certain rehearsal process. So I think it's part of what I said before. It's making them feel, making them know. It's like, it is, as someone said earlier, it's like child raising. It's like they know that I will be there for them, and I'm not going to drop the ball on them, and I'm not going to leave them out to dry. They have to know that without exception for them to, I think, trust me. And that to always feel like we have our own sacred little bubble together, and that if there is a dolly grip that says something out of turn and bursts that bubble, there will be a conversation. And I think that having a certain, I don't mean to say like ferocity in terms of like being aggressive towards crew members, because I also want to treat them well. It's not like crew versus cast. It's, they need to be aware that a sideways comment by a grip can completely change what's happening on the shoot and for the rest of the shoot. And that we need to maintain this world together, this membrane that keeps us all working on the scene. So I think also being a bit fierce about maintaining that bubble, and making adjustments if needed, if that bubble isn't being respected. And I think that for me to be the advocate for them, they trust then that they're in hands that care and aren't going to walk away and care more about light in that moment than what they're trying to do, which is put themselves and their souls and their creative everything on the line. So I do feel a certain, maternal ferocity.
Ferocity. Before you said the word ferocity, the word fierce came to me, but I was like, yeah, but that's so great, because I don't know that it's what a new director is thinking about. They're thinking about, am I doing a good job, instead of, am I keeping my actors safe? I think that's a great way to focus attention. That is awesome. Awesome. Well, Lee Ann, this has just been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
We will hang out and talk Shakespeare one day. But
yeah, sounds
thank
great.
you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Everybody, go and get Student Body and write reviews about how wonderful it is for young adults.
Check it out.
If you like it, write a review. If you don't like it, you're a busy person. Don't worry about it.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone. This was lovely. Thank you,
Thank
Joanne and
everybody
Lexi.
for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank
Happy
you.
filmmaking.
Yay.
Cheers.